Well, he's got a lot of challenges. As hard as he's worked in TV over the last 8 years, you have control over your schedule to some degree. And when you go back into the NFL, you no longer have that control over your schedule. There's 63 players, there's 20 coaches, there's everybody else who needs to talk to you, who needs your time. There's that commitment. It's like going from running on your treadmill to doing a triathlon. Getting used to the changes, the rule changes. You heard him talk about that a little bit in the off season. It's very different than when he was there last.
Yes.
Very different. And in season, how much contact you can have, not just personal contact in the off season where you're getting to know guys, you're implementing your system. You can't do that like you used to. And then during the season, being able to hit, to have pads on, that's almost a thing of the past. And the last thing is expectations. When he was calling games, you could always be right. Yeah. And everybody there was trying to make you look good. Now, to whom much is given, much is expected. And when you make $100 million, you've got a lot of responsibility.
You know, it's interesting because I don't feel like this is Joe Gibbs part two. Remember when Joe Gibbs went away to racing and then he came back to the Washington Redskins? I remember a friend of mine was in the room when they installed the offense the second time around, and they still had, it was the old offense, and they had wide receivers in a three-point stance. And they're like, this, it almost got laughed out of the room. They're like, this won't work. I don't think there's that type of learning curve, but there will be a learning curve. The great thing is he's got a big-time quarterback. The great thing is he has a good offensive line that seemed to be in a system that didn't fit the personnel. The great thing is he has talented wide receivers. You know, they need to catch. They had too many drops. They had a system to which they weren't bought into. I think there's some massive defensive. They have a couple of big-time players on defense, but the defense wasn't even good in the playoff year. But if you can start with, you have your franchise quarterback, you have an offensive line that can protect that quarterback, and you have some weapons to get the football to, I think he's a little bit further ahead of the curve than most that take over a floundering franchise. Is that fair? It's
totally fair. Whenever you take a job, if you've got a quarterback that you can win with, you're ahead of the curve. It doesn't matter whether you're going back after 8 years or it's your first head coaching job. And to me, I'm sure that's what also made this a really attractive opportunity.
Yeah, one thing about who is Jon Gruden? Jon Gruden is a gym rat. All right, he's a backup quarterback from the University of Dayton. He did all the grunt work as a coach. Ended up reaching the height of his profession by going to Tampa Bay, winning that Super Bowl. Went on to have a very successful broadcasting career. I spent a lot of time at the other network with Coach Gruden. But this is different. This league is different. The players that he's addressing on a regular basis are totally different than the players when he coached. This generation of players is different. Now, you mentioned the rules. Yeah, the rules are totally different, but they're different, too, for a reason. This is what the players asked for. So when Gruden, he's used to being a grinder. Gruden is about staying after practice. Let's run 10 more routes after practice. Let's run some of those digs. Let's run some of those takeoffs. This new collective bargaining, you can't do that. Why? Because the players. That's what the players voted for. So in his being brought up to speed on this new NFL, there is a learning curve as far as the amount of time. And Jon is a teacher of the game. And when they tell you, based on rule, that you can spend less time with the students, being a coach in the NFL now is totally different. And how you got to get your job done is totally different. He does have good personnel. That does help. I love him coaching the Raiders. But there is some adjustments, even for a very, very talented coach that Jon Gruden is.
Well, there's two different parts. The first thing is, you're right, there is, he has to know that the players are different now than they were previously. The difference, though, is that those players have grown up watching him with his Gruden's quarterback camp, right? Like, that's the crazy thing. The power of television is there isn't a soul who plays football who doesn't know who Jon Gruden is. And, oh, yeah, by the way, I thought he did a great job when he was doing Monday Night Football, bringing up some of those old practice tapes back when he was with Favre, right? So now you start to kind of connect the dots. Oh, yeah, he's more than just Tampa. He's more than just Oakland. Like, here, he was with the Green Bay Packers, with all these other kind of the wellspring of coaches. But, I mentioned Joe Gibbs, or what was the coach? I'm blanking on his name. Of course, led the Rams to win a Super Bowl
Vermeil.
Dick Vermeil, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two guys that took the longest respites, right? Took time away. And though Joe Gibbs didn't come back and win a Super Bowl, they did get to the playoffs. And Dick Vermeil came back and won a Super Bowl. So there is precedent for doing it. And the difference is he has not been out of the public sight. And so in the relationships with players, much like NFL players know you because most of them grew up either watching you play or watching you as a broadcaster, the same is true for Jon Gruden. He doesn't even have to introduce himself. They already know who he is, what he's about, and what his mannerisms are.
Yeah, but I don't think they know who Jon Gruden is, though. Who he sees on TV, it's like Bill Parcells. I work with Coach Parcells. Yeah. Who he is as a football coach and who he is on TV, even as a great player, man, it's night and day.
No, I understand, but there's some equity there.
Yes,
right?
there's some
familiarity. Yes.
There is, but there'll be things that he'll reference that the kids will have no idea about. I remember I was talking about Tom Landry in one of my meetings when I was in San Francisco, and there's a player from Texas, and he's like, who's Tom Landry?
Of course, the disconnect there. Did you lose your mic? There's a disconnect there sometime between the generations as far as the pictures and how you've learned about the game is totally different than how they've seen the game. I think one of the biggest adjustments is the coaches being critical of him and reporters. Just imagine Jon Gruden, a beat writer, being critical of his offensive play call late in the game, or him mismanaging the clock like we do or the catch, no catch. Coach, what did you think? Or you challenged it. You shouldn't have challenged it. The replay clearly showed. So these type of things as a broadcaster, they're not critical for you. Now being in the limelight and being the guy for the Raiders, like these things are real. And I do believe Coach will adjust to them, but they are real.
I can tell you this stuff when you cover the sport. Now, obviously, I didn't coach the sport before covering the sport. But in trying to prepare myself to try and coach in college basketball, my thought is always hey, instead of studying under one guy and one football family, he's been able to have the football family with the Packers, then be the head coach, and now over the last 8 years, go into everybody's practice. And learn some new things from different people and bring in some of the fundamentals that everybody else uses to your own practice.
I just can't help but wonder, though, if that familiarity that many of these players will have for Coach as a broadcaster and the kind of prism in which they've been introduced to Gruden will have an adverse effect in the sense of maybe they think they know him in a way that they don't, as Cris was pointing out, and maybe there's not reluctancy, but some hesitation to fully embrace him as a coach and not have preconceived notions about who he is and what his style is and what his expectations are.
Well, first things first. When Jon Gruden walks in the door, you know he's in control. You know he's in charge.
Sure.
There is no doubt of what he's doing and who's the guy doing that. Now, the relationship that he's going to have with the players, Coach Gruden would like to think that he's a player's coach. But Coach Gruden has struggled in some relationships of how he talked to guys and how he responded and his style of coaching. I know players that have played for him, and there have been issues with how he communicated his style of coaching to them.
And the other thing that you look at, people do feel they know him because they have seen him, and there will be some benefit of the doubt because of what he's done on TV. But the problem with that is he comes in with such high expectations. The contract, the amount of power that he has, the fact that he does have star power. So if, like any new coaching staff, you go through some bumps, you go through some rough times, people are going to look at that and be taken aback by it. It's going to be a problem as opposed to an asset a lot of times.
Yeah, I do think, though, that here's the benefit he runs. He's in Oakland, and they're not even in Oakland. They're in Oakland for 2 more years. That is not exactly the media epicenter of the world. It's just not. Additionally, yes, they made the playoffs 2 years ago, but it had been 15 years since they've been relevant. So the idea of expectations,
I believe that helps.
I think they're raised by the contract, but that's really about it when you look in totality.
It's still the Raiders.
The Raiders haven't been good since the last time he was in charge of the Raiders.
I think the most important thing is the NFL was better. They have a quality NFL coach getting back into the coaching business. So we as football fans and the National Football League, as viewers, consumers of that product, we win having him back on the field.
Oh, I can't wait to see. It's going to be great. Coach Mangini, thank you so much for being with us all week long. So much fun. And make sure you get that empanada on the way out.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.